Hello people, welcome back to our Mago flow. And finally, after the two Renaissance men, the king and his priest, we can continue and complete this cycle with the two stories of two ladies, two chicks. Finally, the feminine story can be told. But just to make it complex in itself, her story, next to history, we have to view her story. And in our case, we wish to make a complete picture of her story, because she is not only simply the underdog of patriarchy, the innocent, the victim, but she is also a complex character, like, the feminine of humanity, the feminine half of humanity is in itself not clear-cut, not only victim, although relatively victim of patriarchy, but in herself she also carries the dual nature of light and darkness. So to the feminine portrait, the portrait of the she, the collective she, there is also light and darkness. Just as there are good women and bad women, or good feminine traits and positive and necessary positive characteristics and qualities of the female nature. Specifically, there are also bad aspects. We know of scheming, intriguing, manipulative, really evil women too. So it has to be the portrait of her story has to be a double one too. Although it's true that both our king and our priest are good, but on the other side we have the great conspiracy, which is a fully patriarchal dark network as well. So we can observe the light and the dark in both his story, history, and her story, which is the underdog's untold story. So we have her story and we have her story, and one is the murderer and the other is the victim. And guess which one is which, if it's not super obvious. Of course, she is the innocent victim, and she is the manipulative, intriguing bitch. And we're talking about true history and truly coded truth. Leonardo coding her and Botticelli coding her, and they know exactly what they're talking about, because this art that they did in the Renaissance, it's more than art. It's not decorative art. It's by no means arbitrary art, but it's like deeply meaningful and magical and coded and consciously coded ritual art that both the genius of Leonardo and the genius of Botticelli coded for us, so that these are relevant pieces of evidence and information for us too, and hopefully maybe to us particularly, like wake up to these people, like what happened, what's these people, and to history through these people. And in this beautiful case, we're holding the hands the hand of two ladies, two females, come to our aid to tell us about history, and both the naked body of truth in the birth of Venus and the veiled, hidden character of the Mona Lisa are very, very obvious, and they both, whatever their original nature was in life, at this time, through art, through the ages, and through these two coding geniuses, we can retrace true history. And these ladies, these chicks, are calling out to us to realize through their story what's really going on, because they're only players, and these players are playing out a bigger thing, as so are we. And so that's why, in one way, these are chess figures that will go back into the box after playing their part, but they do call out to us, first of all, to wake up and realize the chessboard of human history and politics, even in current times, like which is the dark and which is the light, because it's essential. And furthermore, for us to not only show our chess figure nature, but to show our responsibility that with our actions we are taking sides in a great battle, in a great war. You can only ascend this when the time is over. While we're in the struggle, you have to take sides, and you take sides with your actions. Which nature of yours are you feeding, the good or the bad? And unfortunately, this is what our paradigm is. You're either, it's because it's gone on the wrong track of superiority, inferiority. This dynamic of underdog and overdog has become like the necessary program. You're either the murderer or the victim, and of course, this is what morals are about. You have to become the victim because you don't want to become the murderer. But of course, then in the end, after being the victim and seeing why, understanding why the murderer commits the murder, and that actually it's a chain of events, and everybody who's a victim is also a murderer in some other form or way. And there's no escaping this, but we have to strive to make the right decision to do the good, even if we become the underdogs. Like, this is, the Christ nature of humanity. If you're either the one sacrificed or the one doing sacrificing the other, the only morally only right thing to do is to become the victim. And so in this channel of mine, I am standing up for all the underdogs and the victims, and I myself take on and know this role of mine in my own life and in my professional life, in my private life too. I know that most cases you have to become, and you do become, the victim, the underdog, the trampled and the slandered, and the eliminated, and the unsuccessful, and even you might seem like you're the loser. So yeah, you have to kind of say, okay, so if this is what it is, if this comes with my innocence, if victimhood comes with innocence, I say this again, if victimhood comes with innocence, then you become the victim in this paradigm. Hopefully this paradigm is soon over, so it's not an either or, but actually, so the murderer victim paradigm is like, okay, it's a deep topic, and I'm not sure I really need to go into the deep psychology of it, but I think like I figured out like a big part of it is that it's the misprogramming of the seed. Again, the seed, the Mag, the misprogramming thereof has created this this misplaced, this unbalanced trinity of murderer, victim, and savior, because this is what we're talking about. This is what certain school of psychology is talking about, and it's true that this is a deformation of the original Holy Trinity of mother, father, child, soul, mind, and body. And this sequence has been meddled with by patriarchy by creating the forged false Trinity of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, which does not make sense, and it's not compatible with the original program. The original program was mistranslated consciously and fully consciously and malevolently, obviously. So we understand now where the paradigm comes from. It's the paradigm of murderer-victim. It comes from the famous misprogrammation of the Mag, which is the triple Mag structure, which has been meddled with around 4,000 years ago, and that is what we call the Great Conspiracy. I'm not going to get into it now, but because of this misprogrammation, the false paradigm, it's not false because it's real, but the forged paradigm, the wrong paradigm of murderer, victim, and savior set in. So we see throughout the ages, let's say you can call it the age of Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and this has become history, his story. Of one killing the other, the colonist killing the indigenous, the colonist colonizing the indigenous, man overruling woman, mankind overruling nature, the rational and the mental suppressing the intuitive and the spiritual. So we see this throughout the ages, this dichotomy, which is becoming more and more bloody because there's more and more bloodshed due to this deformed duality. Painful and full of abuse. So abuse has become part of this dichotomy, which should be, it should be a tango, a dance, a kind of sexy dynamic between yin and yang, and between male and female, and whatever the magnetism between the feminine and the masculine is. So there's more and more bloodshed, and okay, so it's a diptych. The innocent and the victim, the killed and the killer. Yeah, the good and the bad. And it's really clear-cut. And at this time in the Renaissance, super clear-cut. And so it is clear-cut today. Unfortunately, these are all meddled with. So you don't know that she's actually an innocent victim, and she's a bloody-handed killer? You don't know, you cannot know, but our task is to reveal this. So hello, let the veil fall and let everybody take off their masks. The masquerade is over, and let's call things by their names. A murder is a murder, and a crime is a crime, and shame is shame, and pain is pain, and abuse is abuse, and bloodshed is bloodshed, and lies are lies, and guys are guys. So, okay, so the Mona Lisa now goes off stage and she will return. So now we focus on the story of the victim, the innocent girl, first. And of course this story has already begun with the priest when we were talking about Botticelli in Hungary, and Botticelli's relationship with Hungary is very key in this whole story, and very key also in our pile of evidence that we have in this case. Because he happened to begin his career in Hungary in the court of the king, and he happened to meet all the leading figures of that age in the Hungarian kingdom. And then he, after years of working here and making a fortune in Hungary, he returned to Florence. And when he returned to Florence, he met this girl, Simonetta, who was then very young and a new celebrity of Florence. And she had such an effect on his life and work that she became definitive in his work and in his life for good, in a very beautiful, very deep and very chivalric, romantic, beautiful way. And Botticelli knew Simonetta really well. They knew each other and they were friends. And after only a few years of their friendship, Simonetta suddenly died, and everybody knew that she was probably raped and murdered, and her murder was covered up immediately by the murderers, as it is very usual and general and common in the land of Botticelli and Simonetta ever since, but actually everywhere. Everywhere, especially if the crime committed was by the mafia itself. Obviously, it would be covered up in 2 seconds. So this is what happened, and you don't know this because the chronicles tell you a different story, obviously, because the chronicles are also written by the winners, and the winners are exactly these guys, the mafia. But this is truth, and Botticelli, thank God, coded this truth, and truth had to be coded, as I've already mentioned before, at this time, because the money guys were the mafia. So if you wanted to get paid, or even if you wanted to survive, not only as an artist, but even just like keep your, head on your neck, you had to conform, and you had to shut up about the truth. Already back then, 500 years ago, and this was true to all the artists, because the arts were not just the arts, the culture and communal life and politics was all headed and not led, but misled and ruled by the banker families and their widespread mafia all over Europe, but if you see the big picture of the big mafia, it's actually already global at this time and very, very cunning. Do not underestimate the mafia of patriarchy, colonial patriarchy. So, back to the story of Simonetta, and here I'm gonna ask my book to help me in following the story so that I don't get lost and just keep ranting to you like I usually do. So, the story of La Bella Simonetta. This picture was painted by Leonardo years after the girl in the picture died the brutal death. So, Simonetta Vespucci was killed at the age of 22. Yes. Okay, so because I have the booklet as well, this is like the short illustrated outline of the 200-page research work which I made and which you can actually find on one of my websites. This whole outline with illustrations, so if you're interested in the story you can visit the website and download, check out the PDF in which you see all the pictures. But here I hold my book, which is the full 200-page book of the research, and this is what I'm going to follow to give you precise details and the original chronology and order of my story. So, the girl. Chapter 1, Rise to Glory. What we know of Simonetta for certain is this. Simonetta Vespucci was born Simonetta Cattaneo in around 1453 in a part of the Republic of Genoa that is now in the Italian region of Liguria. A more precise location for her birthplace is unknown. Okay, blah blah blah. Porto Venere, Ligurian seaside. She came from a noble family. This we can know. And we already talked about the question of nobility. What is nobility? And of course, the nouveau riche, the bankers, create a new kind of nobility, which is money nobility, which is false and forged nobility. They buy the titles, but they don't actually merit their titles. However, the noble family of Simonetta was most probably of the old nobility, the original Italian nobility, and not the banker nobility. You know, not real nobility. So, she came from a really good family. She could have been educated thoroughly. Erudite women were not uncommon at the time. Such was Beatrice of Aragon from the other side, as we will see. But real intelligence and deep understanding of the philosophers was not a mere rhetorical tool to gain and keep power, as it was for them. For the true nobility and true humanists, believers of a spiritual renaissance of the virtues, philosophy was a guide to the stars of ideals. We may well suspect that Simonetta received both the familial blessing of intelligence and education and the divine blessing of soul and enthusiasm. And if she had all these, she might not have been entirely unaware of the political, economic, moral, social reality of the world, at least around her. I quote from Wikipedia, at the age of 6, of course, like the previous thought was my own. And here is the quote. Facts that we know: at the age of 16, she married Marco Vespucci, who was a distant cousin of the explorer, blah blah. They met in April 1469. Okay, 1469, it's important that they met and married in 1469. 7 years later, she was dead. So she had 7 years. And so what happened was she went to church with her parents at the age of 16 in Genoa, and there she was spotted by this Vespucci young man guy who was actually, the Vespucci family were also bankers, and they were related to the Medicis, and so they were mafia, but they were like a maybe minor family of mafia, but they were, I mean, the godfather of Firenze was Lorenzo Medici, and so related to the Medici family were the Vespuccis, and this young family member, young mafioso, basically a young banker, spotted this amazingly beautiful young girl, and that same year he married her. She was only 16, and he took her to Firenze, Florence, his home, where the Vespuccis and the Medicis lived and ruled the city. The city of great wealth and human wealth also was completely ruled by bankers, who are, nouveau riche. So they masquerade as nobility, but they're not. They have money, but that's all. And with money also force, aggression, having unfair, unjust tools, and playing an unfair game, fully unfair. So they rule, the Medicis rule the city. They're related to the Vespuccis, or the vice versa. And Simonetta is married by a Vespucci, and she comes to Florence from leaving her hometown and family behind. And she suddenly becomes part of this mafia world and land and family, right in the middle of it. And she lives 7 years in this environment, and she immediately becomes a star because of her beauty and radiance, and not only like prettiness, but because of her nature and her intelligence and her charm and character and charisma. As we've already seen charismatic men, there are also charismatic women, and Simonetta must have been such a character. And she immediately mesmerized the whole of Florence, including the Medicis and the Medici brothers, both the godfather Lorenzo and his younger brother Giuliano were like struck by the girl, and she became the center of attention. And in 1470, like a year after she moved to Florence, Botticelli was back in Florence too, and with the wealth that he made in Hungary, he bought a house on the very same street, or like the same area, the Ognissanti neighborhood in Florence, and he lived very close to Simonetta. So they were friends, and I'm sure they told each other stories, and I'm pretty sure that Botticelli told her about the Hungarian court. So they were good friends. Okay, let me just see where we are in the book. Okay, rise to glory. Married, attracted the interest of the Medici brothers. Yes. Yes. So, yes, chapter 2, Sandro and Simonetta, we're already talking about this. And so he had to know, Botticelli, the finally tragic tale of La Bella Simonetta, which was her name, called Beautiful. Yes, the house. Okay, so Simonetta inspired Pallas Athene and Virgin Mother, many, many pictures of Botticelli inspired by by her and the allegorical ones, not only beauty but intelligence and innocence and power actually, divine power that he saw in her. Okay, so yes, one more thing. Sandro and Simonetta were neighbors, close friends. After her early death, she became a lifetime of inspiration for him, and at his request, his body was to be buried at the foot of her tomb. So after Botticelli spent a whole life painting the girl after her death, after his life and super valuable testament, he was buried at the feet of her tomb, her grave. So he wanted to lie at her feet even after his life and death. So you may imagine what this means, what this gesture means. This is a chivalric gesture of placing yourself at the foot of your ideal. And for him, this very real person, this chick, was like a divine ideal. I think this is a beautiful act on the part of not just a man but a human being, and it's also indicative of the fact that we carry divinity, and if we recognize divinity in each other, we ourselves will not like you don't want to benefit, but we do benefit and grow from these gestures. Because look, Botticelli, after this beautifully humble gesture of placing himself at the foot of his lady, who is an incarnation of the goddess, the original great goddess of old, who is the source of all life and all good. The goddess that we've already talked about in another context, or in other contexts. Actually, Botticelli made this gesture in real life, not as a religious gesture, but as a cultic, very personally religious gesture. And he himself became a celebrity. I mean, he was already a celebrity and well-known and very successful in his lifetime, but after his life, after his death, he's a megastar of our age. Everybody knows Botticelli, and he's so popular, and even become a very consumerist producer. I mean, this is product. His work has become a product of the market. So from the gesture of sacrificing, in a way, to divinity, he himself became divinified in a way, because he is huge, Botticelli. So the problem, chapter 3, the problem. Okay, so it's all beautiful. Simonetta is beautiful, and Botticelli is a wonderful painter, and he's successful, and all seems to be beautiful and wonderful, and so Renaissance and fluffy. But then we face a serious problem, the bloody truth of reality, which is the Medicis. Okay, here's how the story goes. The problem. at La Giostra, which is a jousting, I'm quoting here, jousting tournament in 1475, held at the Piazza Santa Croce, Giuliano de' Medici, Lorenzo's younger brother, entered the lists bearing a banner upon which was a picture of Simonetta as a helmeted Pallas Athene painted by Botticelli, beneath which was the French inscription La Sans Pareille, meaning the unparalleled one. So, Giuliano won the tournament, and nominated Simonetta as the Queen of Beauty at that event. It is clear that Simonetta had a reputation as an exceptional beauty in Florence, but Giuliano's display should be considered within the convention of courtly love. Simonetta was a married woman and a member of a powerful family allied to his. It is unknown and unlikely that they became lovers. Okay, so I was quoting here. So basically, he fell in love with her. It's quite clear. Here is the portrait of the boy, Giuliano de' Medici. He was the same age as Simonetta. They were the same age, and they were in the same family, and they hung out and they met at family events, and I'm sure, you know, like they hung out, and he fell completely for her. He fell completely in love with her. Obviously, she was the wife of a fellow mafioso, although lower in the hierarchy, which is probably important in such a hierarchical establishment as the mafia. So Giuliano was higher up. He was the brother of the godfather. So he could afford to court the wife of an inferior mafioso. It couldn't work. It wouldn't work the other way, obviously. So, tournaments, okay. So the tournament was already like a hoax, a show at this point. It was the display of power and like really a shit show and kind of laughable. If you know that, I mean, come on, this guy, you know, it's all mimicry and fakery. Giuliano de' Medici, smitten but spurned and perhaps also lethally offended by Simonetta. So what could have happened? What could have happened between them that he displayed his affection publicly? And what could have happened between them that he got so offended? We shall see how offended he gets. But you know, he's obviously like a fully egotistic, narcissistic guy. Panem et circenses, bread and circus to the plebeians, was a key tactic of Roman Caesars. Same here. The Medici joust made it clear the operation of black magic. Ooh. Giuliano's banner with Simonetta's palace is an open gesture of veneration. Okay. Okay. Botticelli's adoration of the Magi, which he painted in 75-76 with the arrogant Medici. Yes. So things turned bad. What triggered Giuliano's anger? What did Simonetta say or do to make him lose his mind? You know, I'll leave this for you to ponder upon. Simonetta Vespucci died just 1 year later after the ominous tournament, on the night of the 26th, 27th of April, 1476. She was 22 at the time of her death. This is a quote from Wikipedia. This is facts. Traditionally, it was thought that her death was caused by tuberculosis. However, new evidence suggests that Simonetta suffered from blah, 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 blah. The increase of tumor volume led to her death. Blah, blah, blah. This is a quote from Wikipedia. But that cannot be true. There might be a truer, more magical, mythical, dramatic end to the life of the iconic La Bella Simonetta. Okay. She must have taken on the fate of the goddess and become the icon not only of beauty but of truth as well. The truth of her blood sacrifice and the sacrifice of everything she represented: love, virtues, nature, ancient holy traditions and religions, indigenous magical cultures and peoples, the Indians and the underdogs, the meek and the weak of this world, the woman, the soul. She was killed, just like the goddess was killed in the collective psyche of humanity, by the patriarchal Great Conspiracy. Okay. Gothic. Botticelli was insinuating a belief system and a reality quite contrary to what the religious and political loudspeakers were propagating. Subchapter: A Little Conspiracy. It is possible, however, that Simonetta became the target not only of one person and not only of a hurt ego. Maybe her tragic end was not merely due to the egotistic outburst of one hurt golden boy. Maybe there was more at stake with her around. Maybe what she represented, and especially what she knew, inside stories of the mafia. She was there at all family gatherings. She became a Vespucci. She was dangerous. Perhaps she even said she could expose dark clan secrets to her friends, to the public, to the other side, to the good people. Okay. So perhaps she knew too much and she was a threat because she was actually an outsider. She was from the original, from the Italian nobility. So she could have become a rebel to the system, especially knowing so much. Now, coincidence that Botticelli so gruesomely illustrated Dante's Divine Comedy with special attention to the details of the hellish scenes. Its key image is obviously Lucifer. With its 2-page size, it stands out outside of the order of illustrations. It almost screams, "I'm real." So, these are Botticelli's illustrations. I mean, there are many. Check them out, look them up. Illustrations to Dante. And his vision seems pretty real and pretty vivid and, pretty much calling out to the reality of this phenomenon. The hell of Dante seems pretty real. Okay. Simonetta. Okay, yeah, okay. Chained in Hell by Botticelli. So the little conspiracy that killed Simonetta and her truth is like a holographic image of a bigger conspiracy. The motives, methods, and networking strategies are exactly the same. Okay, there's so much that I'm leaving out here about the Medicis and consciously plotted within the mafia, or just Giuliano's action, communally accepted and carefully kept a secret. Elimination of her person was a great relief to many. Evil, jealous, lazy, or just stupid. Just like today. Okay. Elimination of Simonetta was a drop in ethics, style, and mental level. It was a big step in the devolution of Florence and humanity. How true. Okay, chapter 4. A very likely murder, a vendetta and coup, and the punishment. So she dies after the ominous tournament where Giuliano Medici displays his affection for her, and she's a star and she's wonderful. Exactly a year after this, she dies. She was, quote from Wikipedia, she was carried through the city in an open coffin for all to admire, and there may have existed a posthumous cult about her in Florence. Her husband remarried soon afterwards. Okay. And we also know, by the way, no, this will come later, another thing that we also know what happened right after her death. So let me suggest that Simonetta was murdered by one of the lords of Florence, Giuliano de' Medici. It is a logical hypothesis since we know that he was smitten and refused. Okay. Furthermore, the Medicis and all dark media, okay, Freud, mafia clans like to kill, and they did so ruthlessly and almost proudly, regularly and systematically. But we also have two specific pieces of evidence to verify the suspicion, one by Botticelli, the other by the nobles of Florence. Okay, so the evidence by Botticelli is that is a painting, of course. It's a sequence of 4 paintings. It's supposed to be, it seems like it's an illustration to Boccaccio's famous story from the Decameron. It's an illustration of a story, but it is very likely that it's something that he wants to tell us through this story. Okay. 4 pictures, and the theme is a spurned lover killing his unloving beloved over and over again under the punishment of hell. This is really the story. And you see hunting down a naked chick, fleeing and murdering her brutally and cutting her open and then telling her story. But the main thing is the murder. The woman hounded, killed, and gutted by the furious horseman. The horseman looks very much like Giuliano. There is even a Medici coat of arms with 6 apples in the middle, Lorenzo Medici in the 3rd picture. And this sequence is suggestive of one key event, the murder of the girl. So there is a killing. In the final scene, the 2 sides are completely separate. Truth and honesty is one side, and mendacity on the other side, the lords of the city looking down as guilty. To recount openly the true story, the murder of Simonetta Vespucci, to recount it silently under the veil of a tale. Okay, the second piece, so Botticelli is telling us the story in this panel of 4 paintings. But you know, you had to keep quiet about it, so it's coded, it's covered up, it's veiled as a scene from Boccaccio, but it's actually telling you a true story that was then hushed up and swept under the carpet of the mafia that remained in power. So this is the only way Botticelli could code the truth. And he did. He did. You know, what's art good for? It's good for more than just entertain. True art does not just entertain. True art holds the truth also. And lifts up consciousness. Okay, the second piece of key evidence and ultimate proof of the guilt falling on Giuliano is carved into the facts of history. The vendetta that followed, the ritual revenge on him by the Florentine aristocracy precisely 2 years after Simonetta's death. The vendetta's timing is the evidence, the message to the future. The outrage over Simonetta's death, which is secret history, was the last drop in a cup of discontent with the Medici lords, which is known history. The Medicis were intensely disliked by the Florentines. Okay, by 1479, the nobles of Florence became totally fed up with the intolerably autocratic, wholly unjust and illegitimate rule of the banker lords and organized a coup to overthrow them. The Medicis should have altogether lost their lives in power, but only Giuliano was killed. History calls it the Pazzi conspiracy, but it was more a communal uprising of Florence against its foreign usurper lords and their system of control and rule. A collective revolution led by the nobility of the city. Two of their leaders were Francesco de' Pazzi and Bernardo Baroncelli. The general outrage was only further fueled by the 1476 story of Simonetta's horrific death, which must have been common knowledge, but hushed by the official media. Obviously, the guilt of the Golden Boy was washed off by his big brother, and it keeps being washed off as long as the courts of justice keep releasing the real murderers of this world, the murderers and liars. Okay, here is the Duomo, famous Renaissance Duomo of Florence, where the Pazzi vendetta for Simonetta's blood and the coup against the Medici was played out in 1478, exactly 2 years, to the day, exactly 2 years after the death of Simonetta on April 26th. When I found this was when I realized there's no question of what happened. 2 years after she died, to the night, she died on the night of the 26th. In 76 and in 78, April 26th, this event happened in the Duomo, during Grand Mass in the Duomo. Everybody was there in Firenze. All the celebrities, everybody, the whole mafia was there during Grand Mass. Just imagine the audacity of this. The audacity, this is when the ceiling should drop. The murderers, the criminals sit in church. The Medicis sit in front row of the church, in the Duomo, their hands fully bloody. And they sit there praying. The audacity, the hypocrisy. And they're talking about Christ's blood, and the blood of Christ is on their hands. And they're sitting there, and there's Giuliano, who himself, with his 2 hands, murdered the beautiful Simonetta only 2 years ago. And this is when the nobles of Italy, of Florence, the original, descendants, hopefully also of the Etruscans, the original inhabitants of Italy, said, no, basta, enough is enough. Like, why don't you guys rise today again? Why don't we, where is the point where you stand up and say, basta, enough of the lies, enough of the crime? And the nobles of Firenze said, basta, enough. And they rose up exactly 2 years after the girl's death, and it was a combined act against the usurping power of the Medicis. And because of the exact 2 years, you can know that it's also a vendetta for the blood of Simonetta. Revenge. You see, it's so not part of my vocabulary that I can hardly remember this word. Revenge, but it's a big one. Revenge for the innocent blood shed. But of course, we from like a fine distance know that revenge is not the answer, because blood gives birth to blood, and revenge gives birth to further revenge. But it's a rightful revenge, vendetta. But then again, it's a very patriarchal thing to take arms against arms. But this is what happened, and probably the intelligentsia, but primarily the nobility, the original Italian local nobility of the city, rose against the usurper lords, the bankers, the Medicis, and rose against the manipulation and the violence, the bloody nature of the mafia, The usurpation of power and the corruption of life with money and blood, like this was. This is actually a very important event, the death of Simonetta, and then the revenge thereof by the nobility. So, what happened? April 26, 1478, exactly 2 years after the death of the girl. Grand Mass in the Cathedral of Florence, the Santa Maria del Fiore. Exactly 2 years after Simonetta's death, to the day, is the date. Any coincidence? No. And so the figure of Simonetta and truth are entwined and directly connected. During Grand Mass, quote Wikipedia, during Grand Mass at the sounding of the elevation, Giuliano de' Medici received a fatal sword wound to the head and was stabbed 19 times. He died lying on the cathedral floor. Lorenzo, who had escaped to the Medici palace, did not learn of his brother's death for several hours. This is what happened. What happened in the Duomo was ritual communal jurisdiction, verdict of guilt, sentence to death immediately executed. As the hands of justice, brave and open, in the name of justice, with faces, names, and general support, unlike the shameful, shady, secret murders and assassinations by the dark forces. Curiously, the killing of the good King Matthias also took place during the Easter Circle and Rites 12 years later. The killers stay ascended on their thrones, and the dead stay down in their graves or in heaven with their truth. The nobles administered one part of justice, but the other they could not. Injustice came back with a blow. Swift and ruthless revenge awaited them. Fierce hunt and immediate execution by the hands of injustice. The same Medici hand killing again and again. So after the coup failed, basically, the vendetta succeeded. Giuliano was killed. The death of Simonetta revenged, but Leonardo fled and took terrible revenge on the rebels, the nobles. Rebels? I mean, they're not rebels. They're the originals. And so the usurpers of power, the Medicis, had it like Leonardo, did not give up, but took terrible revenge because he had the money, he had the power still. Leonardo drew Bernardo Baroncelli, one of the Avengers and rebels, hanged from the window of the Palazzo della Signoria by the order of Lorenzo Medici in 1479. This was painted, drawn. Okay, a large fresco for the customs house of Florence that is now lost depicted the execution by hanging of the leaders of the Pazzi conspiracy in 1478 against the Medici. It was a Florentine custom to humiliate traitors in this way. Okay, blah blah. Pazzi family. Okay. Fresco. The love of Botticelli for Simonetta was even more than the love for all virtues. It was the love for truth and justice. Okay, look at the girl again. Her deep green eyes communicate much more than mere physical attractivity, beauty and youth, desire and purity, freshness and sadness. She carries the promise of eternal spring and rebirth. And indeed, in our realization of what happened and why it has been covered up, is spring itself. It's the hope of the return of justice and truth. A somewhat ironic but more horroristic continuation of the story of Simonetta and Giuliano is that a month after the murderous Medici was killed, his son was born, an illegitimate son, who nevertheless was to become Pope. The genetic program of disgraceful immortality continues, and even increases in intensity. Okay? Giulio de' Medici, son of Giuliano, became Pope Clement VII, who ruled the entire Christian church of the whole of Europe between 1523 and 34. Okay, for him nothing was sacred. Whoa, crazy. And my final Platonic question is, who did Simonetta love? And we can only hope that poor Simonetta, who was murdered by the Medici boy, was happy at some point in her life and was in love. And let's hope that she wasn't in love with her mafioso husband, and for sure she wasn't in love with the Medici boy either. Let's hope that her love was received by somebody worthy. And let's hope that her story and her truth will be reborn. And this is really huge revelation if you can hear what I'm saying through the thick veil of appearance and presentation and stuff. So the truth of this story across the ages, 500 years, through paintings, and what this means about our whole history and what it means to our personal life, even because we're forced into being the victim. And even forced into being either victim or murderer. It's kind of, you have to say, basta, enough of this, this wrong paradigm. It's the whole paradigm. First of all, we need to call out the murderers. Victim, murderer. We have to, there has to be judgment. Judgment Day is what we're waiting for, because the murderers are still walking around. Abuse is still happening every day. Abuse and crimes are happening every day, and the criminals, the abusers, are not, I'm not saying convicted, but justice is not made. There is no justice, and not even truth. First, let's just reach truth, and one can leave justice to karma, the universe, to God, to make judgment, but let's just call a spade a spade. So let's call everything by what it is. And this lady, this chick, Venus here, is a victim. And of course, Simonetta, with her death and fate representing the feminine, is it's a demonstration against patriarchy, because this is what patriarchy does with the feminine, not just simply women, but the feminine as such, and whatever the feminine represents in each individual and in the universe. The nature and role and place of the feminine in us and in our units and in our society and in our religions and in our cosmology, it has to be re-established by us as a community. The feminine has to be reborn, and the truth and justice of the feminine has to be reinstated and repositioned and crowned and divinified again. So this was the story of the girl and the story of the underdog, and I hope it resonates in you, and I hope it resonates, an activation in you and us, and in our society, for the better, for the benefit of all. So thank you very much. Peace.